All right, so we're back at it this morning. It is 7 a.m. on January 20th, and we are now diving into the Wizards of the Coast Virtual Tabletop Policy. So this was part of the documentation that was released yesterday regarding the proposed 1.2 OGL stuff. I love how the new version has draft plastered all over it, because remember, those first ones that they claim were drafts, which were sent out with NDAs and contracts associated with them, didn't have draft on them, but they were drafts, right? So they got to make sure that the new ones are obviously drafts as well. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Anyway, I briefly talked about this, but very briefly in yesterday's video, because yesterday's video was about the 1.2 language referring to tabletop, and I wanted to cover the virtual tabletop policy in a separate video, which is what we're doing this morning. Don't forget, on Sunday morning, the 22nd, we'll be doing a live stream discussion at 8 a.m. Central, so hopefully we'll see you there as well. We're going to be diving into all this stuff, the Creative Commons license, stuff. Meanwhile, like, subscribe, hit that bell icon. Let's have a discussion here this morning. So let's dive into this a little bit so that I can try to understand a little bit more of what they've got going on here. Why does Wizards need a VTT policy? So they claim that we support the role VTTs play in the tabletop space. The ability to game remotely means more people can game, and it's wonderful that people thousands of miles apart can share a space as those sitting around a table. But as VTTs advance, their functionality will raise tricky questions. Will it? Or is that just you looking into the future and trying to dictate? Because I don't see tricky questions at all. But according to Wizards, what's the line between a VTT and a video game? When does a VTT become more than just a replacement for the traditional tabletop? These questions require thoughtful answers. Answering them will take time, and we want this policy to reflect your input. So we'll be asking for feedback and talking to you about our goals as that discussion advances and new technology emerges. So they're trying to lay claim to VTTs as theirs. But this statement right here is that we are the guardians of a virtual tabletop. As VTTs advance, their functionality is going to raise some tricky questions, guys. What's the line between VTTs and video games? Well, we have to define that because we don't want people being able to monopolize and monetize certain components that we don't approve of. So we have to define what is VTT and what is a video game, because those are two separate things that we need to be able to monetize independently. That's what they're saying here. So they're trying to define stuff with the policy so that they can monetize things. This also looks to me, just with that statement right there, is they don't want competition in the VTT space. What they want is the VTT program that is the de facto. Everybody wants to go to this because it's the best one out there, and we're going to shut down all the other ones because VTTs can only be VTTs under the terminology that we dictate, because we're the guardians of that tabletop space, we Wizards of the Coast. And we got to make sure that the world of tabletop is in the best place it can be because of us, the guardians, doing so. And so our VTT coverage, our VTT policies are what's going to govern that and define that. You guys are off your rocker. There are so many VTT programs out there that have already been doing a great job before you ever even came onto the scene. Roll20's been around for years. Foundry VTT's been around. We love Fantasy Grounds. That's the program that we've been using. I used Roll20 in the beginning, then switched to Fantasy Grounds a couple of years ago. I like Fantasy Grounds. I think they're doing great things. But there's lots of different tabletop options out there. There's also Tailspire, which, by the way, the VTT program that Wizards of the Coast is building, if you've not seen the alpha footage of it, it's basically Tailspire. It's just done with a bigger budget, and they're trying to make it the official VTT program that everyone wants to use, but not by making it so restrictive. That's a little ridiculous. Anyway, let's see what's permitted under their policy. So using VTTs to replicate the experience of sitting around the table playing D&D with your friends. So displaying static SRD content is just fine because it's just like looking in a source book. So you can put the text of Magic Missile up on your VTT and use it to calculate and apply damage to your target. Then, the same thing with automating Magic Missile's damage to replace manually rolling and calculating is also fine. I love how they keep using Magic Missile, because one of the things about what they're claiming is their product identity is like Magic Missile, right? And so they're trying to say that anyone who's ever used Magic Missile ever, now they're gonna come after you because that's our terminal. Oh man, it's so funny. The VTT can apply magic missiles 1d4 plus 1 damage automatically to your target's hit points. You do not have to manually calculate and track the damage. So all of that is fine according to them. So using the combat feature of Fantasy Grounds as an example, it does all of that for you. Like it tracks the timers on spells so that you can cast like a sleep spell and it will, it will take care of that for you as you're going through the turns of combat. If you're, as long as you're doing combat through the combat tracker, and I don't know about Foundry VTT. I'm assuming they have similar things. And then there's a turn system, I believe, in Roll20 as well. So all these programs do that to some degree. It kind of takes the weight off the player to need to be tracking turns and manually doing dice rolls and everything else. So that's cool. They're saying that that's okay. However, this is the fun part, and I can tell you exactly what they're talking about with this. What isn't permitted are features that don't replicate your dining room table storytelling. If you replace your imagination with an animation of the magic missile streaking across the board to strike your target, or your VTT integrates our content into an NFT, that's not the tabletop experience. That's more like a video game, and so they're not wanting to allow it. This is literally looking at Tailspire and saying you are not allowed to do what you've been doing because Tailspire has miniatures and I could be wrong on this. I haven't looked at it in a couple years, but I'm pretty sure doesn't it have spell effects and things of that nature that you can use looking at programs like that. Somebody correct me in the comments if I'm wrong before because I'm not going to go out there and look it up this morning. So if I'm incorrect about Tailspire using spell effects, but I could swear they had animations in there. Anyway, what Wizards is trying to define here is they're trying to tell you what you can and can't do with a virtual tabletop program. Well, guess what? You don't control the virtual tabletop space. This is only going to apply to OGL related products. Now, their hope, I think, with this is going to be that, well, the majority of content that is displayed on these VTT programs, the majority of content being sold on these VTT programs that are our competition are OGL related products. So if we're locking down the OGL, then if they want to continue to host games using all this OGL content, that they're going to have to abide by this VTT policy. But as far as I understand, that only applies to content that's being created under their new OGL 1.2. And I don't see anybody, I haven't seen a single person on the internet that is willing to sign the 1.2 terms. Everybody's like, yeah, screw you, 1.0 A is still ours, and we're going to do with it because you can't deauthorize it. So whatever, Wizards. So this is going to be really interesting to see how this play out because they're literally trying to dictate what a VTT program can or can't be because this is about monetization for them. They want to say, oh, no. You've got too much technology in your VTT. There's too much going on. That's a video game now. And if it's a video game, you are required to license that through us through this other licensing deal that doesn't have anything to do with tabletop. Because remember, they have their licensing deals for video games and films and TV shows and everything else. And so they're trying to force people to come to them for video game licenses when they look at something and try to define that as, oh, well, that's not VTT anymore. That's a video game. You got to do this over here. It's just really funny. The owlbear token one, I understand. Says we've never licensed visual depictions of our content under the OGL, so just the text. So I wonder if I'll edit that out or if I'll forget to edit out my sneeze. Anyway, they're trying to say that, not trying to say, this is the part that I say it's not that big of a deal. The text was there before, but you can't use, like if there's an image from the player's handbook, you're not supposed to be able to use that to make your VTT owlbear. Like if they've got an image in their monster manual, you can't use that image to depict your owlbear or your token. You have to create your own. It says if you've drawn your own unique owlbear or someone else did, you can use it, but you can't use theirs. What about OGL 1.8? Does this policy apply to that? Yes, you can upload your already licensed content to a VTT. But again, this is them saying, remember that previous stuff, it's just the new stuff that you can't do. I own or operate a VTT. How does this affect me? If you are a VTT owner or operator who supports OGL products on your platform, you have the same obligations for VTT content that any other website owner or operator has for copyrighted content under the DMCA. This is illegal. This is them, taking a legal shot across the bow of the bow, not the bow. Geez. Anyway, do you have a say in this conversation? Yes, we need your feedback. The potential of VTTs is tremendous and exciting, and we don't want to harm their development. They claim that they don't want to harm their development, but this is all about limiting the development of VTTs. They want to dictate what can and can't be included in a VTT. And I guess that at the end of the day, if we're only talking OGL specific content, you absolutely have the right to do that, because it's the people who agree to your ridiculous terms, which are not going to be very many people. So if you want to try to define it for those handful of individuals who still remain loyal to the Wizards of the Coast brand after all of these years, then you absolutely have the right to define that. But what you don't have the right to do is to define it for everybody else. And so trying to limit what a VTT program can do, I think this is all about looking at the amount of content that in the past has been on the VTTs. Again, mostly, I would honestly argue, and I know some people are going to come at me for this and say that's just not true. There's all these. I can go open Fantasy Grounds right now. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it on this video. Give me a second here because I will need to open Fantasy Grounds, and I'll need to. It's gonna take a second for that to open. But I'm gonna open this. I'm gonna show you what systems are officially supported by Fantasy Grounds. If I start a new campaign, if I go to create a campaign, here are the systems that are allowed to be used. Core RPG Cypher System, okay. D&D 5th edition, D&D 4th edition, D&D 3.5 edition, 3.5, not 3.5, D&D 2nd edition, Fate Core, Numenera, Pathfinder 2nd edition, Pathfinder 1st edition, Starfinder, and The Strange. That's it. That's it. There's no Castles and Crusades. There's no, D6, there's not GURPS. There's none of this stuff. So they only support these systems. So I'm not saying that Fantasy Grounds is the only one you should be looking at. I'm using them as an example. So can I show this real quick? I want to make sure that it doesn't have any of my... Yeah, see, the problem is it's got information on this screen that's I don't want to share. Yeah. Anyway, private information that I don't want to have shared out there. So anyway, those are the systems that Fantasy Grounds supports. And so I think they're banking on looking at something like Fantasy Grounds and say, well, the bulk of everything they've already done has been OGL related. OGL related. Because if you look at the systems that they support, out of those systems, now I don't know enough about Core RPG or Numenera or Fate Core or Cypher. That's 1, 2, that's 4, right? Or The Strange, that's a 5th one. But we've got Starfinder, Pathfinder 1, Pathfinder 2, Dungeons & Dragons 2, Dungeons & Dragons 3.5, we're into 5, Dungeons & Dragons 4th, Dungeons & Dragons 5th. So there's 7 out of their 12, so more than 50% of what Fantasy Grounds has to offer are D&D related rules and OGL related products that can be run through those rule sets. So I think they've looked at this and said, remember, we talked about a few videos ago, they've got like 85% of the market share, right, is what Dungeons & Dragons has in terms of the tabletop space. And I think Wizards of the Coast looked at that and said, there's no way we can lose. So now we're just going to tighten the screws down on all this stuff, and everybody's leaving in droves. So, I mean, they can do whatever they want with their own personal VTT program, but they can't try to dictate what Fantasy Grounds and other programs are doing. But I think they are trying to limit and say, look, you've got all this OGL specific stuff on your systems, and if people want to modernize that up to the current D&D 1, you're going to have to get in compliance as a VTT program with what we dictate is allowed with your VTT program. Otherwise, you can't publish OGL 1.2 products. I don't think they're going to suffer because of it. I think there's enough people, from what I've seen, and again, this may be confirmation bias on my part because I'm reading lots of articles and attending lots of live streams of people who are upset about the OGL and are looking forward to the ORC system, and hopefully that comes out the way we want it. But I think there's enough people that have moved away from Wizards of the Coast already that we're going to see this huge boom of other systems being put into these VTT programs like Foundry VTT, Fantasy Grounds, Roll20, Tailspire, and who knows what else spins up in out of the ether because of all this. It's a great time for competition. It's a great time for growth, evolution. I'm excited about it. But stuff like this is just continuing to makes me roll my eyes and shake my head at what Wizards of the Coast is doing, because it's just I don't know what they think It's impossible to determine what they're thinking with all this stuff. Anyway, I may talk about this again tomorrow with some more stuff. Who knows? But definitely on Sunday we'll do a live stream. In the meantime, like, subscribe, hit that bell icon, comment down below if you've got more information you want to add to this conversation or just talk about things. Don't forget you can join our Discord, support with a super thanks, super chat. Join as a member down below. We have our own tabletop world, point and click game, fantasy, book series, and beyond. Links are all down there. See you next time, everybody. Happy gaming. Have a good weekend.